Finding life a bit complex? Confusing? Aware that your old strategies aren't working? Why not ask Pam and Marilyn? This is the Irreverent Therapists, and we're here to add some clarity, humor, and a bit of what might be considered blasphemy to your day.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Marilyn Bradford, and this is the Irreverent Therapists, and I am joined with my partner in crime, Pam Holdling. Hi, Pam.
Hey, Marilyn. I'm so glad to be here today.
Me too. Me too. Our second show on OMTimes Radio, and we're just delighted. And today we're talking about dealing with elves and rattlesnakes. So I'm just going to read the show description. Do you have difficult, underhanded people in your life? Are some of your so-called friends and family members brilliant at putting on the show of being kind and caring while secretly sharpening the knife that they intend to stab you into your back? Have you ever been the recipient of cutting barbs from the nice-looking, charismatic person whom everyone likes? What do you do? How do you handle it? If you're like most of us, it's all rather baffling because it's not the kind of behavior you would ever engage in. There are ways to deal with it that can put you back in charge of the situation. And that's what we're talking about today, how to deal with some of these little nasties in your life. So, Pam, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how elves and rattlesnakes have acted in your life, or how you look at them, or anything you have to contribute on this area.
Well, rattlesnakes are, say you're out hiking and you see a rattlesnake, it could be beautiful sitting there in the sun. It's not good, it's not bad, but you definitely don't want to go pick it up and try to take it home with you, right? And so It's those people in your life where they are, they look great. They might look great, they might not, whatever, but they're really, if you're not willing to be aware and have your blinders off so that you're like aware of who they are and where they're functioning from, they can strike out at you and you don't even see it coming. So in terms of my life, rattlesnakes, it's interesting, Marilyn. Right now I'm coming up with a blank in terms of my own life, but it's the kind of thing like, so first of all, I want to say, when we're talking about elves and rattlesnakes, it's not like, oh my gosh, this person's a rattlesnake, I better stay away from them, never have anything to do with them. It's not about judgment. It's about recognizing where people function from, because if you're willing to be aware of that, then you can just choose what works for me, what doesn't. So, for example, someone who's a rattlesnake might be a great person to have as a real estate agent to sell your house. Or, there's certain areas of your life where that person and that energy and where they function from could be a great contribution to you. But you don't want to marry them, or you don't want to have them, have them over for dinner. So that's one thing is as you listen to us today, just, we're not talking about judging these people who are in your life. It's when you're willing to really have your eyes open and look at who they are and what they're choosing and where they're functioning from, then you can make that choice of, okay, this person, work with them on this business deal. Yes. Take them home for dinner. No.
Right.
So,
well, and one thing I just want to talk about, because these are terms that we've used for a long time, is what they actually are. So an elf is an evil, we'll just call him an evil little fellow, because we're on international radio here. And that's the kind of person that's apt to say something like, oh, what a beautiful dress you're wearing. You really wear it better than Sally and Mary, who were both wearing the same dress yesterday. I mean, an elf is the kind of person who just cuts you down while pretending to be nice. And a rattlesnake is more, you don't necessarily see it coming. I actually spent a lot of my childhood summers in Montana where we did have rattlesnakes. And I was taught to be very aware not to trust them because you didn't know when they were going to strike. So we're really talking about the people in your life who are willing to sort of stab you or others in the back. And one of the things that I've noticed in my own life is that whenever I've gone into that energy of, you know what, deep down, everyone is actually really nice and kind, I open myself up to being stabbed in the back because I cut off my awareness. That's a judgment. So that's one thing to be aware of. If you have any ideas that everyone is basically good or everyone is basically, there to help you, you just have to find the right way to connect with them. You're going to cut off your awareness to the degree that you're not going to be aware when an elf or rattlesnake shows up. So everything that is, can we destroy and uncreate it times a godzillion?
Yes.
Right, wrong, good, bad. Thank you. You the bod pocking.
Yeah.
And we might say something here about the clearing statement, Pam. I know a lot of people are not as familiar with that and access consciousness.
Right. So Marilyn and I are both Access Consciousness certified facilitators. And that, if you're like, what are those words they just said that made no sense to me? That's what we call the Access Consciousness clearing statement. The words are right and wrong, good and bad, pod for point of destruction, POC for point of creation, all nine, shorts, boys, and beyonds. And you can actually find kind of details, in-depth look at what the clearing statement is at a website called theclearingstatement.com. But what I'll say right now, it's like this cosmic vacuum cleaner sucking up all the crap. That's one of the ways we describe it. But basically, so if Marilyn says, we're talking about all this stuff with elves and rattlesnakes, it brings up an energy for people. And when you do the clearing statement, it clears, it erases, it undoes whatever those points of view or limitations are that we're bringing up and talking about. So it's a great way of getting free of, all kinds of crap that you have put on yourself.
Yeah, and I mentioned, thinking that everyone is good and all of that. There's another thing that a lot of us do or have done that keeps us from being aware of the elves and rattlesnakes in our lives. And that is, if we ever, quote, say, this person is not very nice, we'll tend to judge ourselves and go to the wrongness of us. How can you be that way, Marilyn? That's not very Christian, or that's not very kind, or that's not very this, or that's not very that. But the bottom line is, it may just be an awareness. And I was giving a telecall earlier today, and one of the things that came up was how, as kids, so many of us had our awareness cut off, and we're taught to look at the surface of things or people. So that if, Mrs. Smith next door went to the same church or did the same kind of healing or was part of our supper club or our mom's bridge club or whatever it was, we had to go along with the idea that she was truly wonderful and one of us, even though we may have been aware that she's not really a very nice person. She's prone to whatever it is, but to stabbing people in the back. But if we brought those things up as a child, a lot of us were told, how can you say that about Mrs. Smith? Or, you're not being very nice. You need to go to your room till you be less of a nice, till you can be a nice girl again. So we tend to cut off our awareness of where people are actually operating from, or if we allow ourselves to have that awareness, then we go to judging ourselves for being mean or unkind. So everywhere you've judged yourself for just having an awareness of someone that went below the surface of who and what they appeared to be, would you destroy and uncreate that times a godzillion?
Yes, right and wrong, good and bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys, and beyonds.
Cool.
Well, and I am so glad you brought up the piece about where we go into judging ourselves, because, so many times, especially if you have the point of view of, I should be nice and kind and, look for the best in everybody, then when you do have the awareness and your gut's going, ooh, something's off here, we talk ourselves out of it.
Yes.
And sometimes that's just, it's not a big deal. But if you're, you could be talking yourself out of the gut feeling you have that, this person, if I go home with them, they're a rapist or something.
Yes.
So there's times where, this makes all kind of difference. I know this is going to seem like a silly thing, probably Marilyn, but Marilyn and I were just in Venice, and at this store that we kept going to in the deli department, the first couple of times we went, there was the man who was doing the deli counter. I mean, he was so anti-us, whatever he was judging us as, for being not Italian or crazy tourists or whatever. So this is not a real example. I'm not saying this about this particular guy, but both of us were willing to be aware of this guy and where he was functioning from, and that this is just he is not someone that I would trust or go home with, because he was so in judgment of us. And
the thing about that, Pam, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a perfect example. Both of us then went to, okay, how do we deal with him? How do we get what we desire in the best possible way for us? Do we be nice? Do we try to speak Italian? All of these kinds of things. So when you're willing to be aware, you can then ask questions about how to actually get what you desire from this person. And we are about to go to a break, and we will be back with more on elves and rattlesnakes.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. What if business could be fun? What if business is the adventure of living? What are you choosing? Where do you do business that makes it easier, more fun, or more joyful for you? We'd love to see where you do business. Connect with us on Instagram at Joy of Business or Twitter at Joy of Business, and share your pictures with hashtags BusinessDoneWhere and Joy of Business. Let's change the world with business.
Hi, I'm Katrina Kavanagh, host of the I Am Wisdom radio show. I Am Wisdom is about the connection between mind work and energy work, spirituality, and living a wonderful life. Looking forward to sharing each Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with you.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm Marilyn Bradford, and joining me is Pam Hodling, and we are the Irreverent Therapists. And we're actually, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the show. Our real target, well, we have a lot of targets. One is to have fun, but it's also to let people know that, you're not wrong, you're not crazy, and you really don't have to live out of all the limitations that you picked up growing up. Our show is about empowering you to know what you know, to have more fun in life and to not be the effect of other people, other belief systems, or experts or anything like that. And so today our show is on elves and rattlesnakes, those people who sneak up on you and are maybe not so kind to you, and what you can do about it. So one of the things I was thinking about, was that how I had a couple of, quote, friends, I thought they were my friends, who were both had that energy of being an elf and a rattlesnake. And I didn't know any better because in my family, I was the youngest. I was basically taught to believe that I wasn't very worthwhile. And I was always doing 49% to everybody else's 51%. So the fact that they would be my friends at all made me overlook that they were actually only happy if I was acting less than them. And if there was ever something where I excelled or where I was just being joyful and happy and being me, they were not so happy to be my friends. Now, that all changed a number of years ago when I began to see that I really was worthwhile and I really had a lot of talents and abilities, which we all have, but we often keep uncovered. So if you have any sense of being less than or having to play the one down position or being the effect, chances are you're setting yourself up to invite an elf or rattlesnake into your life because they just love people like that. They can feed on you. They can make you wrong. They can make themselves. A lot of what elves and rattlesnakes are doing is making themselves feel better about themselves by putting someone else down. So that's just another place to look to see if you're inviting that in or if you've got people who are constantly like stabbing you in the back or this or that. You can ask yourself the question, have I invited people into my life by being less than and making them more than?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm so glad you brought that up. Because it's like some people, you might have been raised in a family of rattlesnakes,
yes.
right? And elves, and you're the only one who wasn't like that. And then that's what and you don't know what someone really having your back is, and that's possible. So Marilyn, people might be sitting here going, okay, great, I've identified 3 elves and 4 rattlesnakes in my life. Now what do I do?
Right, exactly.
And part of it is acknowledging what they are, coming out of the judgment of you. Because if you're, like we said earlier, we referred to when Marilyn and I were in Venice and the meat counter guy and how he was, if one of us had gone to this store and that was going on, we might have gone to, well, we've done so much access, we probably wouldn't, but hopefully we wouldn't. But, what people tend to do is we go to, I'm judging him if I think he's being rude or thinking he's wrong in some way and that kind of thing, rather than just saying, wow, this guy's being a real rattle. I guess he was more of a elf.
Yeah.
This guy's just being an elf. And as soon as, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and a jerk.
A jerk, an elf and a jerk. And as soon as, like for me, as soon as I acknowledged to myself, wow, this guy's being a real elf and a jerk, then with no judgment of him, it was just, okay, so how do we get our order in here and get what we're looking for? So it's that acknowledgement, that willingness to, one, acknowledge, wow, this is an elf, this is a rattlesnake, and to not go into judgment of you for having that awareness.
Well, and also, this wouldn't have worked so much in Venice, partly because he wouldn't have understood us. But also, if you have someone in your life who does something elfish or rattlesnakish, you can say, wow, you are such an elf. You can actually verbally acknowledge them.
Yeah.
And that can actually change the energy. Because people who are elves and rattlesnakes often have judgments of themselves, or they're just waiting to be acknowledged. I mean, it may sound funny, but some people truly desire to be acknowledged for being nasty. Wow,
Yeah.
that was so nasty. What an elf you are. If you can try that and see what that creates, I think you might be surprised, because what most of us do is just kind of get hurt and shut down and go, oh gosh, I must have done something wrong, or gosh, I feel so bad, that person's mean. But we don't want to actually acknowledge that they're mean and actually say it to them. So it's a great way to begin to clear the energy when you're with someone who's acting as an elf or a rattlesnake. And I think we all have those. I mean, they're not like unusual in the world.
There's plenty of them around.
There's plenty of them around, right.
Yeah, and and when you do that, when you actually say, "Oh gosh, you're being such an elf today," one, they may not know what you're talking about, but they'll recognize the energy of it and feel acknowledged. And because so often, like you said, Marilyn, what we do is we shut down, or we could have avoided that store and walked across town to go to a different store because we don't want to deal with this guy anymore. And all of that is you being the effect of this person.
Yes.
It's like you can jump through all kinds of hoops trying to placate them, or get around them and avoid them, or all those kinds of things. That's you being that 49%, and it's you being the effect of what someone else is choosing and how they're choosing to be. So when you're willing to acknowledge, wow, this person is an elf, this person is a rattlesnake, you come out of being the effect of them, and you have the choice, all kinds of choice of how you want to deal with them. And it's like suddenly, I think of it as like, the shades come up and the windows come open, and you can see all sorts of possibilities of how you can handle it and deal with what's going on, rather than feeling stuck and at the effect of it.
Well, and part of being the effect of things is taking things personally. And this is something, as the irreverent therapist, we've talked a lot about on other shows and all. But if you can get over taking things personally, you can change your life. And one of the reasons that we take things personally is because we're taught from early on that they are personal. I hate you. You're being a bad child. Or this and that. And what nobody ever says to us is, you know what? Actually, it's not about you. It's about that person. Because an alpha rattlesnake is going to be an alpha rattlesnake to anybody who comes along. It's truly not about you. So if they make a nasty comment, if they stab you in the back, and you're able to go, you know what? This isn't about me. This is literally, if you think of a rattlesnake is going to strike at anyone that comes in their path. It's not personal. It's just what they do.
It's not waiting for you personally to come and show up, and now I'm going to bite Mary. Finally, I've been waiting for 10 years to do this.
Yeah. Well, and I'm reminded of this little story that I want to tell. It's like not a myth, but I don't even know what do you call these things? I'm not finding the word, but an allegory or something. But anyway, so there's this dog that wants to cross this river. And next to him is a scorpion. And the scorpion says to the dog, "Can I ride on your back across the river?" And the dog says, "No, that would be stupid because you'd sting me to death." And the scorpion says, "I wouldn't do that because if I stung you to death, then you'd drown and I'd drown too." So the dog says, "Well, that's logical. That makes sense." So the scorpion gets on the dog's back and the dog starts to swim across the river. And in the middle, the scorpion stings the dog. And the dog is like, "What are you doing? We're both going to drown." And the scorpion's like, "It's what I do. I can't help myself."
Yeah.
And I think that's what you've really got to get, or it's helpful to get, when you're dealing with elves and rattlesnakes. It's just what they do. It's not about you. It's not personal. But they're going to do it to anybody eventually that they come in contact with, and they're going to be encouraged to do it if you're operating in the less than position.
That's brilliant. I love the way you put that, and that you brought up that story, because it so illustrates people choose what they choose because they can choose it.
Because they can choose it. You didn't cause it.
Yeah. It's like, so often we look for, okay, well, what was their childhood that led them to be this way? And, if I can understand it, then maybe there's all this stuff. And it's just sometimes people choose what they choose because they choose it. Yeah. And if you're willing to be aware of that, look at it, keep your eyes open about it, you can see who's functioning as an elf, who's functioning as a rattlesnake. And then you have the choice of how you have them or don't have them around. When you're not willing to see that, then you're at the mercy of it all.
Yeah. And also if you put things on it like, well, they're family, I have to be nice to them, or, well, he's my boss or my coworker, so I just better do what I can do to make things okay, that almost never works. Because if you don't actually confront an elf or rattlesnake, or acknowledge them is maybe a better term. I'm not talking about confronting them like, how could you do that to me? I'm talking about, wow, that was kind of a nasty statement. If you don't do that, then they basically up the ante. So that's just something to be aware of. By not actually acknowledging them, what you're actually doing is encouraging them to be more of that. If you can actually say something to them, like, wow, that hurt. Was that your intention to say something nasty to me? Then it puts them on the spot and having to basically acknowledge that what they did was rather nasty, so that they don't have the kind of out to up things again. And we are about to go to another break. And we're talking about elves and rattlesnakes. And we will be back in just a couple of minutes.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Live with medium Lisa Phoenix, Mediumship Messages and Musings, explores mediumship and all things metaphysical. Lisa Phoenix invites you to reach above and beyond your everyday experiences, to explore new dimensions in the spirit world. She will do live readings to connect callers to their loved ones in spirit, shares engaging stories and teachings from her own personal experience, and will have intriguing conversations with other mediums, spiritual teachers, and healers to help you understand the metaphysical world so you can connect to these forces in your day-to-day life. Join your host on this magical and metaphysical journey into the world of spirit every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. Join Elliot Jollish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jollish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jollish Hour. Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
welcome back, everyone. I'm Marilyn Bradford, and Pam Hodling is joining me as the Irreverent Therapist. And we're talking about what do you do with the elves and rattlesnakes in your life? And we've actually put forth a couple of things. One is to not take it personally, to actually acknowledge that they are what they are and that they would treat anyone that way. And the other is to acknowledge them, whether to yourself or them. But I know that people often have questions about this because you can have them in your families and you can have them in your workplace, in places where people feel like they don't have any choice but to deal with them. So let's talk a little bit, Pam, about what else people can do when these elves and rattlesnakes show up in their family meetings. Maybe it's immediate family, maybe it's during family reunions, or everybody knows that Aunt Jessie is blah, or if they have to deal with them at work. So I think that's, one of the things is, and you mentioned this, Pam, is you don't have to be the effect of these people. So what else do you think we can offer our audience about how to deal with the elves and rattlesnakes in their lives?
Well, so actually I've got two different things coming into my mind at once. So
okay, cool.
I want to go with it. So I don't know if this, this might not as directly address what you brought up, but it's like there's now my brain just went 25 different places at once. That's really interesting. But yeah, so when it's in your family, so often we feel like we have no choice. There's nothing we can do. We're stuck with these people. And so really, Marilyn, the first thing that comes up for me is to kind of use some of the tools we know to undo that significance or that point of view that you don't have any choice.
Yes.
So actually the clearing statement that we've been using is the first place I would go, of, everywhere that you have made it, so significant of your family, and that if it's family, you have to stick with them, what it means to be family, all of that, destroy and uncreate it, times Godzillion.
Yes, right and wrong, good and bad, pack and pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds.
Because when you have all that in place, it's very hard to see any other possibility. And if you're actually willing to go, okay, just because this person is in my family, am I actually willing to be treated this way?
Yeah.
Or, to put up with this? Would I put up with it from someone else? If not, because I think one of the things we tend to do is go, well, because it's family, I got to just eat this. I've got to live with it. So everything that is, can we destroy and uncreate it times a Godzillion?
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad,
pack and pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. Stereo, clearing statement.
Yes. So then, with that out of the way, and you might want to do a lot of clearings about yourself and your family. That could be a really great thing to do.
Yeah.
Then, actually the things that we've already talked about do work even if they are in your family. But in addition to that, Marilyn, what I would say is, how do I want to put this? Okay, so I know when something came up in my own family where I felt like one person in my family was treating someone else in the family in a way that I was not willing to sit back and watch, it's like I had a choice. I can speak out, say, excuse me, no, and know that that's going to create something very different in my family. Mm-hmm. Or I could have just pushed it under the rug and pretended it wasn't there. Right. Which just even talking about it, just saying that, push it under the rug, pretend it's not there, it's like kind of makes me want to puke. So that wasn't really an option. Because one thing is the more you're willing to show up as you in all these different areas of your life, it doesn't work anymore to shove yourself under the rug and try to to just take it, whatever it is. But not from, I'm resisting it, I'm never going to let myself be beaten down again, or whatever it is. It's just the choice to actually show up and be you. So, for me in this situation, I was just like, hey, nope, this isn't okay. Not going to be around you guys if you're going to choose this. And from there, then we've gone on to start creating something different.
Well, and that's the thing, Pam. It's like if you're actually willing to be aware and acknowledge what's going on, there's a possibility for something much greater to get created. I'm not saying it's going to happen every time, because there's also the possibility that everybody is going to turn on you for basically saying, excuse me, there's this enormous elephant in the living room that we've never talked about or handled. So it's got to be a choice. But the bottom line is, if you allow it to continue in your life and your family, what you're basically doing is you're putting your life behind the lies that are going on in your family. And it's not a right or wrong, but it is a choice. You have to ask yourself, or you don't have to, but it's helpful to ask yourself, am I willing to put my awareness first? Am I willing to actually, and this is not a like, you can't treat me this way, how dare you? It's not that at all. It's much more like, you know what? It doesn't work for me to have you say nasty things about me or my children. It doesn't work for me for you to get drunk and abuse my kids. It just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. So either you need to change your behavior, or we will not be coming to these reunions anymore. And that's not giving up. It's not resistance and reaction. It's the willingness and the awareness to know what's true for you and what works for you, and not sacrifice yourself in the name of family in order to make everybody comfortable with the lies that they're living. That may be a little harsh, but basically that's where I would come down on that.
Yeah, and you know what this also makes me think of is earlier in the show, Marilyn, you referred to 49%, 51%. We haven't really talked about that, but it's that so often in any interaction, one person's taking the 49% role and one person's taking the 51%. So there's always one, one's better than, in charge of, one's less than, one's the victim, whatever it is. And there's a different possibility, which is you choosing to be 50-50. And so, and it's not, this doesn't mean like, okay, say there's money involved, we get exactly the same amount. It's not literal like that. It's more the energy in the space you're choosing to be. Are you trying to prove you're the 51%, you're on top? Are you choosing to be 49%, you're on the bottom? It's choosing to be, it's truly choosing to be you and show up as you when you're willing to be the space of 50-50. I'm here. I'm meeting you halfway. I'm aware. I'm looking at what is. I'm not, operating from the fantasies of what I think family should be, or I think my work should be, or anything. I'm choosing to show up. And from that space, if you've got an alpha or rattlesnake and you choose to be that space, there is nothing those people can do to you.
Exactly. Exactly. Because they're dependent on you taking it personally, on you being 49%, on you allowing them to control you. And when you don't allow that, not from a space of resistance and reaction, but just from a space of being you, they don't have anywhere to go. They really don't. And I just wanted to say a little bit more about this 50-50, because this is huge. This has changed a lot from me, because you would think 49-51, it's not a big deal. It's, 1-2% or whatever. But that 49-51 is all about one person's up and one person's down. The 50-50 is not equality in the sense that, okay, I'm a mom and you're the kid and we should make all our decisions together. It's actually about each person acknowledging and honoring the other person as a unique individual, and we have our roles to play. So if you're the mom or you're the whatever you are in your family and you're operating out of 50-50, you never need to put anyone else down, but you can also be in the space of, you know what, son, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for the family for you to be acting out like that, throwing things, hitting. So here's the deal. You need to go to your room until you're willing to be happy. until you're willing to come out and treat others with honor and regard. Now, you can do that from a space of 50-50. You don't have to act out like, I'm the parent and I'm going to tell you what to do. And the same is true with the rattlesnakes and elves in your family. You don't have to go into, how could you treat me that way? Or, I'm going to get even with you and I'm going to control you. You can just say, wow, I acknowledge that you're an elf. I acknowledge that you just said something nasty. That's really interesting. You know what? I'm not going to take it personally. You have your life. You make your choices. I have mine. I make my choices. So it's really coming from a space of acknowledging that we are each unique individuals. We each make our choices, but we don't need to take any of it personally, and we don't need to jockey for position where we're up or we're down or anything like that.
Yeah. That you put that so well, Marilyn. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I think so often, when there are these elves and rattlesnakes, I think what we tend to do is spend a lot of time going, if only they'd be different. If only Aunt Mary wouldn't blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
If only my boss wasn't blah, blah, blah. And, that's putting yourself in the 49. You're waiting for them to change. You're
Yes.
hoping they're going to change, and then things will be okay for you. All these different tools we've been talking about, when you're willing to acknowledge, hey, wow, this guy's really an evil little fellow. What an elf, or what a rattlesnake. Acknowledge it to them. You're being such an elf. Or just choosing to be this space of 50-50. It's like you're no longer the effect of anyone or anything. You're not waiting for them to change. You're not waiting for them to finally see there's a different way of being in the world. You can just choose it yourself.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the thing. We have this idea that if I did the right thing or said the right thing, they'll change. But no, they won't. They like the way they are. And that's one thing you really have to get. And we will talk a little bit more about this and people liking and choosing what they choose when we come back from this break.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
Radio Namaste leads you down the yellow brick road into portals of consciousness with the blue-collar goddess as your host. Interviews with humans who could be famous or just popular, and answers to everything are on the agenda. Tune into OMTimes Radio and drop in on Thursdays at 3 Eastern. It's a different brand of enlightenment.
Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Irreverent Therapist. I'm Marilyn Bradford, and I'm joined with Pam Hodling. And we are talking about elves and rattlesnakes, those people in your life that look good, but tend to turn around and stab you in the back, and nobody wants to acknowledge what they are. And we've been talking about just acknowledging them to yourself and them, rather than just pretending with everybody else that, oh, it's really fine, underneath it she's real nice and all of this. But that doesn't actually change anything or do any good. And before we went to break, we just touched on the idea that the people who choose to be elves and rattlesnakes, they do it because they can. And I think that's a really, really important thing to get. It's not because they were abused as children. There are plenty of people who were abused as children who choose to be kind and make a conscious decision to never treat anyone the way they are treated. People who are mean and nasty are mean and nasty because they choose it. And I'm not trying to say they're wrong or bad. All this is about truly is just acknowledging what is. But if you can acknowledge that, then you don't have to go into, oh, well, I know she didn't mean it. She only did that because her mother was mean and maybe she was having a bad day and all of that. You can just go, you know what? That's a mean lady, and I think I'm not going to have a lot to do with them. Or I'm just going to say, you know what? Your being mean doesn't work for me. So please be aware of where you go into reason and justification and explanation, because that's actually how you cut off your awareness.
Yes, that is so true. Because it's we talked a little bit earlier about, so often people want to see the good in people, see the best in people, assume they have good intentions, but they're just misunderstood or whatever it is. And, when you're basically what you're doing with that is putting blinders like a horse has, or they have these blinders at the sides of their head so they can only see straight forward and they can't see anything on the sides and get spooked. So when you're trying to limit what you're willing to be aware of, I only want to be aware of the nice, warm, fuzzy stuff, not aware of anything else, you're putting those blinders on. And that's where you do get blindsided by life, blindsided by people. If you're willing to actually be aware of all of it, then you're not going to be taken by surprise. One of the things, Marilyn, you and I were talking about before the show started is being willing to be the energy of a rattlesnake or an elf. And you might be like, well, what do you mean by that? Why? I don't want to be that.
Yes,
that's not the kind of person I want to be. But one of the things we talk about a lot is being willing to receive everything, the energy of everything that is, the awareness of everything that is. And Marilyn, I find for me the best story that illustrates this for me is the one about there was a owner of a men's clothing store that was located in the gay district of whatever city it was, and his store was not doing very well. And he actually asked Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, for assistance to facilitate him and what was going on. And it was this guy, he was a man, he was straight, and he was very uncomfortable with all the gay men who would come into his store, men's clothing store, middle of the gay district.
Right.
And, and the sexual energy that these guys would try to flirt with him or hit on him or whatever. He wasn't willing to have that in his universe. So what Gary did was facilitate him, with these points of view about being, gay and gay men and all these different things, to where he was willing to receive the energy of what the men were directing at him. Now, it doesn't mean he has to suddenly run out and be gay and have sex with men or anything like that, but he was no longer resisting it. He wasn't pushing away that energy. He could receive everyone who came into his store, be aware of them, and receive the energy of them, and his business started booming. Right? So it's if you're willing to be aware of and receive the the energy of, there are elves, there are rattlesnakes, here's one right here next to me, or whatever. You can have it in your universe. It doesn't mean you have to choose to run around and say nasty things to people, but you're not resisting it anymore. And if you ever needed to have that rattlesnake energy to strike out, and in some moment, you could have that if you needed it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's absolutely such a good point, Pam, because we need to be able to have any energy at our disposal, even if we don't ever choose it. But just the fact that it's in our universe makes us less of a victim. Mm-hmm. And you can do little subtle things. I mean, I'm thinking about people who have rattlesnakes and elves at work. There are very subtle ways to let them know that you're not going to let that affect your life. And you can ask a question like, what is it that I can do or pinpoint that's going to let this person know that I am not going to be the effect of them, no matter what? And the trick is to not go into, oh my gosh, how could they treat me this way? Or to not go into, I'm going to get even with them, because both of those totally cut off your awareness. But if you can ask a question like, if you have someone, say, who puts you down in a meeting and takes credit for what you've done, you can ask yourself, okay, so I know that that's what this person's going to do. What can I be and do different here that's not going to allow that to happen again? And it may be sending an email to your boss going, hey, I just finished this. I wanted you to take a look at it. It could be a number of different things. But you can actually, if you're willing to be aware and acknowledge what they are and how they're apt to act in the future, you can actually ask a question that will change what you do and will not allow them to have that power over you or put you in the 49%, no matter what. I mean, so it's really, really, it's so crucial to be able to acknowledge them, to be able to be willing to have that energy in your universe and even use it if you need to, and to look at and ask questions about what can I be and do different that's going to ensure that I am not the effect of this person.
Well, and Marilyn, I just want to point out, as Marilyn's saying all of this of, what can I be or do different to not be the effect of this person, it's not coming from resistance. It's not, this person is so terrible, I can't believe they're doing this, I can't believe they're doing this to me, I can't let them get away with this. The image I have in my head is I'm stamping my foot, like I'm putting my foot down, exactly. I'm not going to let this happen anymore, right? That's that resistance and reaction, which actually perpetuates whatever it is that you're resisting and reacting to. What, as Marilyn's talking, you might notice, there's none of that in her voice. There's none of that in her universe. It's like, wow, this is really interesting that this person is choosing to, keep stealing my stuff and take credit for my work. That doesn't work for me. What can I be aware of? What can I be or do different that would change this? From that space of not having any judgment of it and not being kind of vested in, this is what's going to solve my problem. This is what's going to make them stop. Again, that's that I've decided and I'm putting my foot down. She's in question. What would create something different here? From that space, she can see all the possibilities of what action she could take that would change it.
Yeah, and just remembering, you're not less than anyone. The only thing that makes you less is when you cut off your awareness and are unwilling to actually see what is and talk about it and acknowledge it. But, for all of us, we're all essentially 50-50. This reality tells us we're 49-51, and a lot of times with an alpha rattlesnake, we'll put ourselves in the position of being the 49 and letting them, and it's not even about letting them get away with it. It's really about what works for me here? What would be honoring of me? and knowing that you can change any situation that you want to change. You truly can. Most of us don't get that, but we have choices beyond anything we've imagined, and some of it comes from acknowledging simply what is and asking a question about, how do I change this?
Yeah. So, anyway, I noticed, Marilyn, we're just about at the end of our show. So,
we are. We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. So, any last words about this, or should we talk about next week?
Well, the one thing that I would like to say is, please, 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 everyone, don't make yourself the effect of others. There's a wonderful book by Dr. Dane here called Being You, Changing the World, and that's basically it. When you begin to show up as you, all kinds of things can change, because no one can stand in the face of someone who is willing to truly be them and not be in resistance reaction and not being in alignment and agreement. And so if you have an elf or rattlesnake in your life, just show up as you. Acknowledge what they are to yourself and acknowledge them for what they're doing, and just be the energy of, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to go into resistance and reaction for you. So, all right. So very cool. We do have a couple minutes left, but so I want to talk about our show next week. Who are you making the source? Because this really builds on what we're doing here. Who creates your life? Do you have a sense of being in charge, or is it more that things just seem to happen to you? And that happening to you, that's exactly what gets going when you're going, they treated me mean. How could they be so mean to me? I don't know what I said or did that was wrong. They were just mean. That's being the energy of something that just happens to you.
So that's next week. Bye, everybody.